Maharaj, the notion, though, of the idea, ed, is that, and this is quoting from Hegel, and it says, the idea is the concept, insofar as the concept gives reality and existence to itself. I repeat that. The idea is the concept, and insofar as the concept gives reality and existence to itself. To do this, the concept must determine itself, and the determination is nothing external, but it is the concept itself. In other words, it is a self-determination. And within the philosophy of Hegel and the understanding of Vaishnava and consciousness, the application of the idea being the concept, as far as the concept is giving reality the existence of itself.
Yes.
Sorry for interruption.
Yeah. That is the speculative, what Hegel calls speculative conception or viewpoint. Conceptual realism. Where Hegel is an absolute idealist. Absolute idealism means the ideal is the real, and the real is the ideal. There's a difference, but that difference is also an identity. They're identical, like when you have identical twins. They're different, but at the same time, they're identical. So the concept and the real, the ideal and the real, are different, but they're also identical. The ideal, the concept, and the realization, the actuality. When the ideal, you can say, is the potential, and the real is the actualization, the activity. So we have to understand that in Hegelian philosophy, we're not talking about static existence. We're talking about living, dynamic thought. Describing something living and dynamic, organic. You're not talking about the way thought usually works, is to talk about things as some kind of substance, substantial, unconscious, unliving items or thoughts even. But Hegel tries to give us, put us into a living mode of thinking, a mode that follows living, thoughts that follow the life activity, the life process, the living process. And in that living process, there is movement of thought. To follow that moving thought, we have to be very flexible in our own self and not try to grasp everything in some static form, tangible form. We have to be very pliable in our thinking and our hearts, and allow that flow, the flow of the living thought, the thought of the living, to take its course. And surrender. And we have to surrender to that thought, that living thought, the thought of the living. And that is not our thought. And finite, our thought is finite. That thought has no limitation, which is at the basis of everything, which we can say is the thought of the Lord, God's thoughts. Einstein said, I don't want to know this or that or the other. I want to know the mind of God. He told. God is very, has no limit. And we can only be part of that. We can only, what God was saying, connect with that through surrender, accepting it in its own free movement and free determination. That determines what we are. And that is our self. That substance that we are is God. Underneath all things, there is God. And Hegel gave the example that we misunderstand supreme being. When we call God the supreme being, we misunderstand what that means. Supreme being doesn't mean there's some being who is supreme, and then there's all other beings that are not supreme. And that is not the proper understanding of supreme being. Supreme being means there's no other being but that being. Human being? What does it mean, human being? Being means what? There's not two beings. Being can't be two. Being means the same thing, one thing. Being, it is. But it's true. So it's not like there's one mountain that's bigger than the others, and then the other mountains are there too. No, they're all made of the same stuff. That's being. Not this mountain versus that mountain. What are the mountains made of? That's their being. It's all the same being. It's all one being. That's supreme being. That supreme being from which all other beings get their being. That is God. So our being is in God, then, in the supreme being, not in our own finite being. That is called Maya. That is the illusion. Being is one. And we are all part of that. And what do we say? I am, that being, has its substance in the supreme. Haribol, Therese.
Haribol, sorry I'm late.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, Vasudeva Sarvamiti is explained there also. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, the supreme being, is Vasudeva. And he's everywhere, everything is Vasudeva. You are also, we are all Vasudeva, but not in a individual sense, not in a finite sense. In our ultimate sense, everything is Krishna. Essence, we can say. Essence. Every tree is a tree. I say tree, and every tree is a tree. But every tree is not the universal tree. Each individual tree is not the universal tree. Tree is a universal word, a universal term that relates to all trees. Every tree then has to participate in that idea of tree. The idea of tree is there, and every tree participates in that. That's why we call it tree. But each individual tree is not the universal that we say when we say tree. It's a particular instance of the universal. So there's a difference, and there's a sameness. Every tree is a tree, but not every tree is that tree. Just like when you say animal, maybe it's easier to understand. When you say animal, every animal is an animal. But there's a difference between animal and dog. A dog is an animal, but the dog is not every animal. There's also cats, elephants, and so forth. So there's the universal animal, and there's the particulars. So there's God, and there's this creation. And everything is a creation of God. It's his energy. But not everything is God. God is everywhere, but not that everything is God. We worship the deity, but we don't worship the mud or the stool or the other things like that. We don't worship the refrigerator. Refrigerator is also God's energy. But we reserve our worship for the deity and the devotee, and not all these things. So they say God is everything, but everything is not God. Not that God is every little thing. How do you explain that, Shanta Maharaj? How do you explain that? God is
But
everything.
everything is coming from God, but that everything is not God. You want to explain that?
Yes.
It's like energy and energetic, Maharaj.
Yeah.
So if the energy can come from God, they have some similarities there, but it is not exactly the source. Actually, there is some difference exists there. So we cannot make Shakti and Shaktiman the same.
Your light bulb, the light bulb is coming from the powerhouse. The light is coming from the powerhouse. But your light bulb is not the powerhouse. Electricity is coming from the powerhouse and lighting your light bulb. But the light bulb itself is not the source of the power for all the other light bulbs. Light bulb. Getting its power from somewhere. And all the light bulbs are getting their power from the dynamo, wherever it's coming from. Nowadays they have power coming from the windmills or the solar panels, or they burn coal, or they have waterfall, hydroelectric. Power is coming from there, and then it's being distributed to all the light bulbs everywhere. But we can't say that light bulb is the source, even though it's that electricity that's going in that light bulb is coming from that waterfall. And it cannot give its power to others. Not too much. There's some kind of substation sometimes they have. The electric comes through to a substation, and that substation distributes it to other places. But that's not the source. The substation is not the source of the power. So
another thing is that God has that infinite consciousness. He is everywhere in that sense. Means he is aware of everything. But that does not mean that he is aware of everything, that those things also is God.
What? Yes. Rishikesha Rishikanam. Sevadam Bhakti Ruchate. The source of the senses is the source of the senses. We are sensing things, but where does that come from? Where do those senses go? How do you see? We are seeing, but where is that seeing power coming from? The molecules the eyeball can't see. The dead body eyeball is there. But can that eyeball see anything? Eyeball can't see. The seeing doesn't come from the eyeball, doesn't come from the brain. It comes from Rishikesh, the controller, the owner, the possessor of the senses. Rishi Kesha. Esha means the Lord. Rishi, the senses. Rishi Kesha, Rishi Kanam, all the senses of all the living entities. They are to be utilized in the service of the Lord, who is the owner and controller of the senses. That is bhakti. Huh? That is bhakti. That is service. Highest form of service.